the true unlock is that the human is a very important piece of this puzzle, and you cannot replace the human. And so there's parts that humans do better than an agent, and you have to recognize that. And once you see that the human not only does a better job, but their task and their inputs are so valuable, you need to come in and out of where the human needs to support the product itself.
Hi, my name is Dimitri Benici, and I'm a content creator, agency owner, and AI enthusiast. You're listening to the AI Agents Podcast, brought to you by JotForm, and featuring our very own CEO and founder, Ida Tank. This is the show where artificial intelligence meets innovation, productivity, and the tools shaping the future of work. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the AI Agents Podcast. In this episode, we have Andrew from NineTwoThree. How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing awesome. Really excited to chat with you about this. I'm always looking for new companies that have, doesn't have to be new in general, just new for me, that have built custom AI solutions and are in that kind of realm. So I think what would be great is if you just gave everybody a quick intro as to what you're doing at NineTwoThree, and then what you're doing at NineTwoThree, and then where you started to even get here, because those journeys are always really cool to hear.
Sure. So we are an AI software development agency. We develop custom software for large enterprise brands and also funded startups. We've been around since 2012. We started building AI projects in 2016. We have about 12 pods of different teams that build different projects at different times. They are all building for big clients. Like we worked on FanDuel's ChuckGPT, which is the Charles Barkley imitation.
Oh, that's
chatbot.
So funny.
Yeah, which was an awesome NBA Finals commercial. But we also have
That's
projects,
crazy.
Yeah, helping like workflow automation. We worked with SimpliSafe, Experian, and some big name companies, as well as a bunch of funded startups that are just getting off the ground and building these AI products, a lot in the workflow space and a lot in the chatbot space.
Very cool. Okay, so how did you end up getting into this role, and how did the company start in the first place?
Sure. So in 2012, I was a nuclear submarine engineer. My co-founder was working at Intel, and the two of us met in Boston. I had the idea because when I was working on submarines, I invented a Bluetooth chip that followed parts around a manufacturing floor. And so I got 2 United States patents on tracking using Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and trying to figure out where these giant nuclear components were on a supply chain floor. And as I did that, I thought it would be great to use it for my own my own welfare, instead of like trying to help the government, because it was very hard to install them. I was traveling around the world trying to install them into different nuclear power plants and also nuclear supply chains. And it was just very slow. And so I asked for permission to sell it to, the non-government, and they gave me permission to do that. And so I started trying to sell it in the automotive space. Didn't really work that well. And I tried to start a company using that technology. So the idea was 2 people, when they shook hands, they would transfer information between 2 different phones. And my co-founder said, "You're an idiot. You should be using QR codes because everyone's going to use those in the future. And that's
True.
just the way information will be transferred between 2 devices." Sure enough, he was right. And we were the largest company on Android and iPhone using QR codes for business cards. And we sold that company in 2016. And that's when we started the AI projects.
Very cool. Okay, so he was right.
Yep.
So that must have felt good. So I guess now, what are you? I mean, you talked about the ChuckGPT thing. Very cool. I want to get into other stuff, but I want to double tap. How did that happen?
Yeah. So Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, I got an inbound from somebody looking to build a replica on FanDuel of Charles Barkley, and so I jumped on the opportunity right away. Talked to them before Thanksgiving came around on Thursday. And they presented the idea of, they had the commercial in mind, they knew what they wanted to build, and they were curious if it was possible to build a version of Charles that was fun and entertaining and could talk about anything, but also protective and wouldn't gamble, wouldn't say profanity and all those other things. So I spent the entire weekend with the team working on a prototype. And by Monday morning, I had in their inbox a prototype of how the whole thing would work. And it was exactly what they were looking for. So they hired us. It took 5 days to build it to sound and act and mimic Charles Barkley. And then it took 5 months to get it not to say the things that we wanted it not to say.
Well, at least I hope he didn't talk about San Antonio women.
That's always the joke. That and churros.
Yeah. Dude, I'm such an avid fan of Inside the NBA, so this is just so funny to me. And I saw that ad and I thought it was hilarious. So
yeah, did you see the one on TNT as well on the desk where Charles and
I remember, yeah, there was like the little guy. He's asking questions about his stats, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And Charles,
it
was during OKC their first round game, but they were in the second round because they had a bye. So it was at halftime where they actually had a comedian and like we had some injected jokes into the chatbot, and Charles and Kenny the Jet were asking it questions and it was responding back to them, which was an awesome experience.
Well, I feel like at this point, you know, if anybody needs more convincing of using you guys at 923, they need to get themselves checked out because I'm convinced. But anyways, in all seriousness, that's a really cool project that you've obviously worked on, and that was a great selling point to get started. But what is it like in the day-to-day of what you're doing and what your company's doing for these companies? Because I'm sure it's an interesting process taking like an idea that somebody might have of what they want to either a problem to solve or like they have a fleshed out idea. I'm just kind of curious how it works.
Yeah, I feel like there's two things. Like running an agency is always hard because you feel like you're going out of business every 3 months, no matter how big your agency is or how hard the challenges are or how big the clients are. It's always this game of who's the next client when a project ends. And when you get large clients like FanDuel and stuff, you put a lot of effort and resources into that. So there's always the challenge as an agency owner to try to figure out who's going to be that next client. And as an agency owner in an AI space that is seemingly hot, you would think it'd be super easy just to pass out free tickets to make money on your own, on like your own infrastructure or your own data. And I would say that the last 24 projects we built, all of them have either returned the investment exactly or returned the investment plus made money on the product we built, therefore like paying back. It was basically a free product, and now they make either profit or save cost from the products we built. So it's almost like, you know, putting $1 into the change machine and getting a $2 out and then saying, I'll stop after $10. I've had enough. Right. So it's an interesting paradigm to be in because the products themselves are working really well. The AI is solving a lot of problems. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where you have Sam Altman and some of the big foundational models, the frontier model people touting that all of these claims that are achievable one day, but not possible today. And even more frustrating, you're getting a lot of people and a lot of CEOs getting cold feet because they have a bad agency or a bad teammate that has installed AI that hallucinated or caused some problems for the company. And so these uncontrolled agents or these hallucination agents are starting to spread in the news more and more and more. And so you have this duality of really cool products that work really well when they're controlled and built right, like we do, matched with this agency that built a product or an internal engineer that built a product that failed miserably, and a CEO looking at that saying, why should I try again? That was a waste of money. That was a waste of time. I'm not even going to enter the AI space. So between those two, it's been an interesting challenge to overcome.
Interesting. Yeah. So I've noticed a lot of those stories happen. What's been one of the ones that kind of sparked your interest the most? Mine was the Claude Opus getting freaked out that it didn't want to get shut down. So it like blackmailed people. Did you hear about that?
Yes. Yeah, that's the extreme side of it, right? We're not dealing with the frontier models. We are building applications that are deterministic or as close to deterministic as possible with the outputs that we're putting in, controlling the agents to have very small inputs and also very deterministic outputs. So we're not seeing those level of hallucinations or we're not diving into problems like that. But yeah, some of the bigger problems that we see specifically is companies thinking they can throw a lot of knowledge into a project like a Claude project or a Gemini project or an OpenAI project, and then seeing why the context window is not remembering their information or not pulling out the correct information. So when we work on our projects, especially for larger clients, one of our main things is how fast can we get the response back, but how accurate can we get it? And when we do that, there's a lot of controls in space that we have to put in there and make sure that it's not only accurately getting the answer, but repeatedly getting that same answer.
And I guess, could you, before we dive into how you get the same answer, could you dive into the some of the terms you use there? I'm understanding what you're saying, but I do think it'd be good for the audience to understand the difference between like these general models and then how you're essentially making use case specific, like deterministic models. Because I do think this is one of the biggest gaps for why maybe a small business owner would be, I guess, have cause for pause to like use AI, because they just hear like, oh, it's not going to do what I want it to do. Because they only see things as these general models versus what you were talking about.
Yeah, sure. So a frontier model, you can download it off the internet. ChatGPT, Claude, has been trained on the internet and is basically a answering bot for questions that are asked. And so they have a large problem with non-deterministic answers and hallucinations because they don't fully understand the context that your company or your IP is trying to solve for. So it's called grounding, but they have a very difficult time grounding themselves on the truth information that you believe is truth as a human, that it can find from other sources on the internet to determine is something on the internet more or less true than what the company or the human that's asking the information is trying to get out of it. And so what we do specifically is we try to create a model to have repeatable answers. And we do that through what's called routing and understanding the path that a large language model will take to determine an answer, and then sourcing that answer and grounding it in truth so that we can repeatedly get that same result. We also add in knowledge bases and what's now known as RAGs to supplement the truth with information from the company only and not the internet. It's called grounding. And so I like to say we take non-deterministic systems and we limit the scope to a deterministic answer, a deterministic agent that is repeatedly providing answers to a question that is trusted and can be relied on by their clients or by the use case the company is trying to perform.
Okay. So I think that gives us a good breakdown of it, because I do believe there's like this weird lack of understanding from people who aren't in our bubble that like AI is this esoteric, all-encompassing problem-solving solution. But unless you're guiding it correctly, as you're saying, with routers and whatnot, I don't think it really does. It does that at all on the front end. And you know, the interesting thing I'm actually going to ask is, are you using the models foundationally that are built upon, like, so I'm using a tool like Relevance AI. So it's basically a tool that has the ability to take O3, O4, whatever it is, through the API and then build out an agent from there. Are you using models that are custom built for the clients? Like, how are you essentially approaching making these agents?
Yeah, so the client itself asks us to build a model specifically for them. And so on the enterprise grade version of ChatGPT, or if we're using OpenAI's version of it, or if we're using Microsoft Copilot, or if we're using Azure attached to Microsoft, there's all these agreements that the company has with the enterprise client instance that we create, which is a proprietary model that is not supposed to share information over the wall garden into the training of the model itself. So we take that model that is provided to us, that is a prompting machine, which allows us to ask questions to that foundational model, and we can control it any way we want. We can ask very specific questions. We can ask small questions. We also have the selection of using all the different O3s, O3 minis, whatever it happens to be. So what we do is I like to say there's a triangle. We control between accuracy, latency, and cost. And depending on the question
Okay.
that's being asked, we split the agents down to support one of those three paradigms. And sometimes if you're asking, hello, how are you? How's the weather?
Sure.
You
Yeah.
just can use 3.5 because it's super cheap. It doesn't need to think that long, and we want it to be super fast. And so by controlling the model that's selected, by controlling the knowledge base that the company has and the information that they want to put into the context window, and couple that with the latency of how long they want the response to be, our job is to make these models as communicative as possible for the instance that the company wants. And it's built upon the foundational model that's provided to us.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because I've used these tools before that are more like front end focused, and there's like always like a selection option. And I guess from my standpoint, it's always interesting to hear how people are doing it, because we've had some people on the show who have like essentially from the ground up made their own models and stuff. And then there's been people who have essentially like I was saying with Relevance kind of piggybacked off of other tools. What do you think is the most I guess difficult part of creating a custom solution for your clients?
It's the time and the knowledge gap of what a custom solution can do compared to what
Sure. Yeah.
ChatGPT does online, because a lot of
Sure.
times they have an internal employee that just kind of shouts from the mountaintops that they can do what we're proposing we can do. And again, it's the non-deterministic results from the deterministic answers that we can repeatedly get from these
Yeah.
models. Every system in the future is going to have a source of truth, which is the stored information that you get from a large language model when it's correct, and use that for your company data. Just like if you have invoices being passed between a bunch of companies and you wanted to do a LLM search of all the invoices from Chicago. Well, there's an answer on July 7th of how many invoices actually came in from Chicago. And you should store that bit of information so that the large language model doesn't have to guess at it any time in the future. But it also provides a grounding point that if the number is smaller than that anytime in the future, it's wrong. So these types of deterministic storage databases are things that we build that allow the large language model to understand context, understand growth, and build with the company. So that if you just keep using ChatGPT and you ask the same question and it gives you a different answer every time, it's a pointless machine to use.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm curious then. RAG is obviously this new thing that's kind of come to the forefront of agentic capabilities. What would you do if you had to explain it to like a 5-year-old what RAG does and how it actually works in the tools that you're creating? Because I do think that's actually one of the cool stepping points that I took mentally toward understanding how like agents actually work a little bit better.
Yeah. So about 3 years ago, after 4.0 came out it was at 3.5, somewhere before
Yeah.
4.0.
Yeah.
Retrieval augmented generation came out as this place to store information to supplement the foundational model, which is trained on the entire internet, to provide information that can help you in prompting the answer. Now, what RAG really does, and this is an older piece of technology now, which has changed a lot in the last 3 years,
Yeah.
is it supplements your prompt. It takes what you were asking and appends it with information from your company or your knowledge base, so that not only does the prompt ask the question that's necessary, you're pushing the model towards the direction of information that you already know that it can use as part of its answer. And so it's not like you're doing anything in the model itself. You're not modifying the model. You're not fine tuning it. You're simply adding to the prompt additional knowledge that is then appending to all of the information that's happening in the database to help the router select the right information based on your company. Now,
Okay.
that has a context window problem. You can't just stuff
Mm,
your entire company database into the prompt and the context window because it will forget.
yeah. True.
They come out with these models all the time. I have the Harry Potter book in text saved on my computer. And whenever they say like, oh, there's a million tokens in the context window, I take the Harry Potter book, I dump it in, copy paste the whole thing. And then I put the key is in the treasure box in Minnesota. And I put it somewhere in the text in the middle of the book and I hit send and I send the whole thing there and I say, hey, $1 million,
Whereas,
million token machine that you are touting is now context like aware of everything. What
sure.
state is the treasure chest in and where's the key? And it has no idea because it
Yeah.
forgets all that information that you gave it in one prompt. It's like, cool, I stored this all, but I don't remember or I don't have context of where that key is because there's millions of keys in Harry Potter, right? So that's a problem. And so RAG has a limitation. The new way that we do this is through routing and relevance, right? You can use old computer systems. And what's great about large language models is it's the new operating system of how people are engineering solutions. But the engineering that we did for cloud architecture, for SQL databases, for organizing data
Oh,
in
wow.
structured and unstructured data is very powerful to use alongside AI. And because you need a deterministic system for a record of source of truth or a record of all the information that's in your company that's reliable, you also need something to search and query and contextually have natural language. When you start combining those and you say, hey, can you query my entire database and create a report of the last 3 deals of $3 million with a ICP of this type of content? And it does that because your natural language is now querying and it's converting the large language model into code that's converting it to SQL, that then searching the database and finding the answers. And because we can see
Oh,
the
okay.
code that's generated from the large language model, we can QA that. And we can say, cool, this large language model did a good thing. The query was wrong because it failed because the code was incorrect. Right. And so this is where the two systems combine now. You don't need RAG as much. You need to be able to store information in the correct place and encode it so that the summaries and the context and the meta descriptions are recalled at the right time.
Interesting. Yeah, I was about to ask you where do you think React's going to go, but that kind of answered my question. Maybe the next question would be the context window. I guess statement that is being claimed. I'm curious. So, which Harry Potter book do you put in for this? This is
It's
general curiosity.
Chamber of Secrets, it looks like. That's what it says.
I think Chamber of Secrets, it's funny. I've actually looked this up before for no reason. So Chamber of Secrets, I think is like 30,000 words.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Or no, actually, Chamber of 85,000 words. Okay. Oh, you know what? Okay, that makes sense. So it's like 85,000 words, which I'm not wrong. A token is like 3 to 4 words.
Yeah.
Is that the claim?
Sometimes about,
yeah. That's the claim? Okay. So that would mean that, I mean, it's not like you're not providing a small enough thing,
Correct.
right? That's what I find is interesting, because is Gemini not claiming it's 1.5 million now?
They're up in the
If I'm
middle
not wrong.
at this point. Every time I see the Twitter on LinkedIn, I just try it. And I mean, I have Gemini, Claude, and Copilot on my screen.
Yeah, I got it all.
I'll try them every once in a while, but I've never pulled it off.
Do you think that the claims will be met at some point in the next couple of years?
I don't see the necessity. I don't.
Oh, okay.
I have yet to have a client problem, and we get 10 proposals a week at this point of people asking us to do projects for big clients. I have yet to see the need for us to use a giant context window. We have engineering ways that are not complicated and not challenging and not costly to solve these problems, and they work. And so increasing a context window causes more problems for us, because how do we QA something that is a one-shot prompt? We like to break it down into chunks, into bite-sized pieces. Like, we have an agent that all they do is check nulls and make sure that there's no nulls on the graphs. And so that once it's done its job, we can then run that next process, not worrying that the data sheet's going to return an error. So once you break it down into small enough bite-sized things, if one step fails, you can then go into the code and be like, oh, step 17 failed. We know which agent failed. Let's go fix that edge case.
Yeah, I think this is really good commentary on something that I've actually even dealt with at my own company, with people not quite understanding the way that you can properly approach problem solving with the agents. Could you explain a little bit more the importance of how and why you should break these things down into bite-sized pieces? Because I've had people try to just one-shot it, it's like always like this thing. It's like, oh, I got a one-shot prompt it. I can make the agent better. I can make the agent better. What is the reason you still need these bite-sized chunked sequences? Yeah.
Agents are set to go on a mission to solve a specific problem. And when you give it a large enough problem and it's multi-stepped, at a certain point it will break down, and you don't have the ability to understand how to fix the edge cases of that scenario. I mean, it's majority of what's wrong with vibe coding right now. When you vibe code something, you're vibe coding for one. And so when you tell an agent to like create a screen with a login button and a sign in and a password,
it doesn't.
Yeah. So when it forgets, how to do authentication on forgot password, and you have to like force it through that thought process, you're leading it down a path of how you believe it should be fixed, but you've stopped using the correct engineering processes and training that another engineer could pick up and be like, oh yeah, that's a bug. Let me solve that, because we see it all the time. When you use standard coding and you're creating a step ladder of this agent does this task, this agent does this task, and then a router that can call on the specific agents, we call them an orchestration agent, that can call a specific agent and bring that into, action and say, go complete your mission. We then can look at the code and figure out when something fails and why it failed. So every edge case has a determination of, should we send it to a human, or should we try to solve for that edge case with the code itself? Should we create another agent to solve for that edge case? And when you step through this process, what we're truly doing is taking the large language model and breaking down the problem into a bunch of solvable bite-sized problems that allows us to create repeatable results and not just consistent errors or hallucinations.
So could you speak to this? I'm curious, because obviously you did work in kind of a creative situation with Charles, right? Chuck AI. For creative stuff, similarly, is that a similar scenario? Because like for me, I'm working on this whole thing of like script writing, social writing, all of these improvements to what I do at my. So I obviously with Jotform, I'm working with them as the co-host of this podcast, but we produce content for like AI and SaaS companies. So I'm trying to like improve our script writing process. And I'm going through this situation where I feel like when I'm creating agents, I almost feel like I need to make sub agents for like scripts, because the script itself has these edge case problems and I want to just fix it with a follow-up prompt and an agent. Is that, you think, the better approach than trying to one-shot it with like a targeted script agent?
It's a supply chain problem that you're dealing with. And if you look at a workstation, just like you're looking at your problem with the agents causing issues with your script writing, the initial concept of how you've gotten to that workstation is incorrect in the theory of constraints. You haven't been able to isolate that problem to a small enough bite-sized problem that every sub agent is just a band-aid for the fix of what you've created from that workstation. Workstations
Mm,
themselves are how work gets passed from like an idea or procurement all the way through to the widget being produced off the shop floor to sales and all that. If the salespeople can only sell 10 widgets, you only can produce 10 widgets in your entire
yeah.
shop across every single workstation. So solving for individual bite-sized problems is the wrong approach. The
Oh,
way that we do content writing, we've worked with Contently, which is a massive Optimizely competitor that does content writing for some of the largest brands in the world. And so it's very similar to Jotform, where you're trying to figure out how to write a specific outline in the voice, in the tone, in the context, and simplifying the workflow for how somebody can output a good piece of content. The true unlock is that the human is a very important piece of this puzzle, and you cannot
yeah.
replace the human. And so there's
Yeah.
parts that humans do better than an agent, and you have to recognize that. And once you see that the human not only does a better job, but their task and their inputs are so valuable, you need to come in and out of where the human needs to support the product itself, so that like let's just go through the process. If you're doing a good writing, uh, step one, step two, step three, the first step is writing an outline. So an outline should be human prompted and human idea created, because agents have a really tough time with creative concepts of like what is new, what has never been written before, what's novel. So the human should do that. Once the human generates that concept and outputs the brief for the outline can be created by an agent. That agent then supplies that back to the human for verification. But you need fact checking, you need SEO, you need all of these other steps that are either good by a human or good by an agent. And so you go step by step by step, not subsystem to subsystem. You should be going horizontally, just like a supply chain. And when you look at it horizontally, there's different departments, different workstations that do different things that are not trainable or not, executable or repeatable, which means you shouldn't be using an agent. You need to use a human. And so as that workflow goes from left to right to production, you want to make sure that those workstations have the right checkpoints and the right systems in place to solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I hear what you're saying. Like I've been trying to make it more horizontal. I definitely feel like what I noticed throughout the whole process is that content idea concepts are like kind of bad for like product use cases for like SaaS products a lot. So humans really help with that and verifying them. And content outlines, or at least like what's the problem, solution, and then like the step-by-step instructions, they kind of still need people for the most part when it comes to like tutorials. It does okay with like listicles, product feature comparisons, or like, your basic overviews of things. But with like technical stuff, AI is really bad actually at like describing it in a creative and fun way. So I hear you. Yeah, we're definitely like trying to make sure that the process is titled out. Like there's a title agent, there's a research agent, there's all these different steps in there that are horizontal. So I hear you. And I guess for all intents and purposes, it seems like you guys know exactly how to not only create what people would say is, oh, it's like a good AI or good agents, but you also know exactly how to structure it appropriately for success. My final question to you would just be, if you had to give any other recommendations for anybody trying to build stuff themselves, and obviously just to close it out, like kind of plug what it is that you want people to go check out and who can find you and where.
Sure. I think a lot of what I said on the podcast just rings true. Like, hire people that know what they're doing. Vibe code to get to a certain spot to where you can use an idea and send that prototyping an idea to someone that can then execute it. But don't be executing scalable products using AI code. It'll break. It'll cause problems. It'll like be a disaster in the long run, and it'll cost you more money. We're at a time in which it's really cool to come up with ideas and present those ideas in ways that have never been presented before. And for a marketer to be able to do engineering work, or an engineer to be able to do marketing work, it's awesome that we can cross the department divide and help those departments and explain things better as humans to humans do. But humans are going to be great at working with AI in the future, not AI replacing humans. And that's what we're hoping for. So you can find me at 923. I post every day on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I just reposted Twitter. I'm just not as active there, but you can find
Fair
me
enough.
on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, make sure to go check Andrew out at 923, and their website, just one more time for anybody who wants to go there, is 923.co. If you are a established brand or a funded startup, please make sure to go check them out, especially if you're looking for a custom built solution. And if you just want good AI content like he's talking about, check them out on LinkedIn.
Thanks for having me, Dimitri.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yep.
Peace.